it's not just the hate. As you said, it's the historical ignorance, which is astonishing, particularly when it comes from people you'd think would have a grasp of history. They're academics, they're members of the media, the working media. You mentioned some of the other outlets, CNN, The View on the ABC. Let's just have a look at some of these examples.
You know, this idea of how the royal family, how this family grapples with its history and legacy of colonialism, of slavery, of the potential paying of reparations is a really important one. And I think that King Charles understands that his job is, yes, as a monarch, but he is also an anchor for this Commonwealth.
She said, a thieving, raping, genocidal empire is finally dying. May her pain be excruciating.
It was a thieving, raping, genocidal
but I think
empire.
I'm lost for words. Step in.
First of all, if the British Empire had been genocidal, the people in question wouldn't be alive. They wouldn't be speaking. If the British Empire had been a genocidal empire, it would have tried to kill all of the people under its rule. It did no such thing. There wouldn't be any people in the countries that were under British rule if the British Empire had been genocidal. Genocidal is the intent to wipe out an entire people. The British Empire never tried to do that anywhere. That's the first thing. The second thing is that absolute moron we just saw first from CNN talking about reparations. She has no idea in her own racist hatred that Britain paid reparations 250 years ago. We paid reparations throughout the 19th century. We paid reparations for slavery by abolishing it under George III and then policing the high seas to ensure that slavery not only was outlawed across the British territories, but was outlawed across the high seas. We paid higher goods in Britain throughout the 19th century, higher prices in goods, because we wouldn't deal in enslaving countries such as the United States of America. And so when people talk about reparations today, it demonstrates not just their own basically give me cash mentality, which is all that you see here, but also the incredible ignorance. They don't know that Britain paid down any moral and financial debt it ever had 200 years ago under very distant predecessors of Queen Elizabeth II. And these people are not just tin-rattling money makers. They're also just constantly showing their unbelievable ignorance of everything that happened before.
Well, 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 well. Once again, folks, Douglas Murray doing what he does best, eviscerating people, his opponents, when they basically start saying things that are pretty stupid and inaccurate, eviscerating them with his sharp wit, his sharp tongue. I've often said that when you're debating Douglas, you know what? It's going to be like a velvet glove is hitting you, but with the power of a freaking sledgehammer. That's right, folks. And how we eviscerated that black commentator that was basically talking about how England needs to give reparations and how King Charles now is supposed to be the anchor of the monarchy and that he needs to think about these things too, and how terrible it was during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. And, you know, Douglas basically says, doesn't this lady know the history? We've already given reparations. England was one of the first nations to outlaw slavery and did everything in their power, as he said, to continue to outlaw it and to go against it, to be sort of like the admiral of the seas, making sure that the slave trade was not continued or was intercepted. And one thing I'd like to ask this black commentator, doesn't she know that more slaves were given up by black tribes against other black tribes, and they were captured and they were given to the white man as they came, the white Europeans? The white Europeans never went into the interior of sub-Saharan Africa or Africa to collect slaves. No, they were brought to the beaches. They were brought to the ports. By who? By other blacks. Those reparations were paid by those tribes that went ahead and captured other blacks and brought them to give them to the European white people so that they could be taken overseas? No, she doesn't know that. And then Assumption Cummings. Oh, Sunny Hostin. Not only is she a cultural appropriator, but she's a cultural name appropriator as well. Of The View. She was basically talking about a quote that somebody said that they hope that Queen Elizabeth is just absolutely having, I mean, that whatever pain or they're associating with her reign, whatever agony that they're associating, which is all unbelievably false and not true at all. What they're saying is that may she not rest in peace after death, but that may her grave, I mean, just horrible, horrible things in terms of that pain and agony that she feels now after death. This is what's coming from the left, folks. The left that says, oh, words have meaning. Trigger. You don't want to upset anybody. Maybe they don't want to, oh, so during you're alive, we don't want to upset you. But once you're dead, all bets are off. We can say whatever the hell we want. Anyways, folks, we're going to get to more of Douglas Murray. He's got some other choice things to say about so many other things. We're going to get to that. But before we do, just want to let you know you're watching the Dr. Nasser Shake Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasser, where I give you my personal prescription of my basically political perspective of what happens when you've got culture, science, media, entertainment, religion, and politics and wokeness culture, and they all collide. Let's go to some more of Doug Murray right now.
We've seen an outpouring of grief and gratitude after the Queen's death, but also it's revealed just how twisted and divorced from reality some leftist publications have become, none more so than the New York Times. You've written about the paper's hostility against Britain. What's driving the type of coverage we've been seeing from the New York Times?
Well, I'm afraid that the New York Times, I've written about this quite a number of times in recent years, since 2016 has just had an unbelievable animus against Great Britain. It seems not to have been able to forgive the populace for the democratic vote that meant that we voted for Brexit. And the paper, which used to be the paper of record in the United States and used to be a very highly regarded publication, made an incredibly frivolous set of assumptions. It assumed that Brexit was the same thing as Donald Trump. It assumed that Brexit was somehow against the international liberal ideas of the New York Times. And so for the last 6 years, it's run a campaign of defamation, slander, and libel against the United Kingdom. And a quite incredible campaign. I've documented it. It's just, sometimes it's just ludicrous, like its culinary section will claim that people in Britain are basically still living on gruel and mutton. Sometimes they get just basic facts wrong, or they just get a gob left winger to say, for instance, that Britain's a racist country. Usually, by the way, an ethnic minority British person who claims that Britain is racist, yet weirdly is still in it. And then this week, I think the paper hit what is just a new low even for it. Within hours of the news of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, the newspaper decided to immediately run an incredibly hostile piece by a left-wing non-entity academic talking about colonialism, empire, and the crimes of colonialism, and that Elizabeth II had much to answer for, and this sort of thing. They didn't even leave it 24 hours before doing this. And we've seen in
The reason for that, folks, is they probably had this piece put away for a long time. Whoever this author was, this, idiot moron, this, all I can say is racist, bigoted author who wrote that hit piece on Queen Elizabeth II, like I said, within hours upon her death. This must have been written long before, sitting in a file, just waiting to be put out as soon as something were to have happened, and in this case, obviously, upon the death of Queen Elizabeth II. That's exactly what happened.
days since other left-wing media join in. CNN, MSNBC, they've all decided to display not just animus against the Crown and against Great Britain and the Commonwealth. They've also
Hostility.
decided to display their extraordinary ignorance of history.
Yes.
I mean, they seem to believe that, for instance, Elizabeth II oversaw the empire. They seem to believe the British royal family made its wealth from colonialism. They seem to think that the colonial era was so terrible that the Commonwealth countries must have been strong-armed into joining the Commonwealth. They've totally ignored the fact, of course, that every Commonwealth country's leadership, quite understandably, has been expressing their mourning and grief for the loss of Elizabeth II. And why would that be if she was such a tyrannical ruler? Only because that's in the head of these very twisted, spiteful, hateful people like the New York Times. It's quite amazing to watch and very disturbing, because it's a reminder, if I can say so, that, you know, institutions like the New York Times used to be great institutions, and they've been destroyed by hatred. And that's the exact opposite of what Queen Elizabeth showed in her own lifetime, which is that you build institutions with love and loyalty. And that's something that the CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, they wouldn't understand the language we were speaking in there.
Listen, folks, the left, the liberals, the progressives, academia, the mainstream media, they don't understand terms like love, family, family values, religion. They don't understand these terms. Endearment. They don't understand. They like terms like diversity, inclusion, equity, fair outcome, equivalent outcomes. Those are things they're looking for. They use words like racist and bigot and insurrectionist and Islamophobe, triggers. Silence is violence. That's what they go for. These people, as you said, the mainstream media, both print, television, radio, you name the avenue that they're in, internet, they all go on racism, folks, bigotry, hatred, enmity, fomenting, dissension among groups of people, identity politics. That's what's happening. That's what they understand. That's what they talk about. And as far as they looking for diversity, they want diversity of everything except diversity of thought, diversity of opinion. Because once you have those and you're not with them, you're not with the left, you're not with the woke mob, you're not with the virtue signaling, you're not with the elites, you're not with the progressives, you're not with any of those, and you happen to have a different opinion, you happen to have a different idea, you want to say something different, and it's diverse, they don't want you at all, folks. They don't want you at all. Let's continue with Douglas.
No, and it's not just the hate. As you said, it's the historical ignorance, which is astonishing, particularly when it comes from people you'd think would have a grasp of history. They're academics, they're members of the media, the working media. You mentioned some of the other outlets, CNN, The View on the ABC. Let's just have a look at some of these examples.
So hope you enjoyed this. Just another episode where Douglas Murray calmly, succinctly, precisely, as I said before, just eviscerates stealthily, people that run their mouths with the verbal diarrhea of the left, and just very categorically, point by point, eviscerating, sharp wit, sharp tongue, sharp memory. That's Douglas Murray for you, folks. One of probably the leading, great minds of this generation. And it's just absolutely, it's just absolutely extraordinary to watch him in his debates, here when he comes back. You have to agree with everything. I don't think I agree 100% with Douglas Murray. There's some things out there. That's topics for other times. But you know what? For the most point, pretty spot on in terms of going after woke culture, going after liberalism, going after progressivism, cultural Marxism, you name it, modernism, postmodernism. This is the guy, along with Jordan Peterson, and there's so many others out there, but these are probably top two. 1 and 2, you can place them either way you want. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasser Shake Show. I've been your host, Dr. Nasser. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel. If we've earned it, like, share, and follow us. Check out our video links above and below. Leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.